How can we use AI in L&D to better support outcomes for our business and employee? In this 14th episode of Learning Horizons and the fourth one of the series dedicated to AI, I am delighted to explore how AI can support both employees and business performance. It's been a couple of years that we focus on to playing with AI and what can be done and thinking about the what, the if, the how. But really, it feels like 2026 is the year when we're going to have to start looking at AI as an infrastructure and at scaling up. So what does it mean for us in L&D? And I'm really looking forward to today's conversations with Catherine Dock. You are our first guest in the series who actually has a tech and software background, but you moved into business transformations earlier on into your career. And recently in the past 20 years, you've developed a focus on L&D functions with an expertise on end-to-end employee life cycle. So that's totally relevant with the way AI is really can be seen as an infrastructure and how we can really leverage it for growth and development. And I believe you developed an AI competency program earlier on when working at the London Stock Exchange Group in 2024. So thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us in Learning Horizon. Your experience is very relevant in helping us understand and shape practically how to move from play at individual or smaller scales into being part of the largest strategy of the business and support performance management. So thank you, Catherine, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Gail. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about this.
Lovely. Actually, before we get started, you are definitely an AI pioneer, and I would like us to tell you a little bit more about how you get started with AI and why you got interested into its potential.
So, funnily enough, my husband has a master's degree in AI, but he got his master's degree 30 years ago. When AI was a very different beast. And over the years, we'd had many conversations around AI and the direction it was taking. But for a very long time, it was very much that kind of old school, almost an ideological view of AI. And then it was being used in very, very specific particularly scientific scenarios, in medicine, particularly in some areas of physics, but not really beyond that. And then obviously over the last 5 years or so, we've started to see AI very much come into the mainstream. And really, for me, it was invention as, the mother of necessity is the mother of invention, that way around, sorry. In that we were starting to see it being used in areas of the FinTech space that I was working in, especially in terms of algorithmic AI and how it's being used to regenerate models. And we started to see some of our engineers using it. And we recognised that there needed to be more oversight and more guardrails put in because, as a financial institution, we needed to make sure that the AI being brought in wasn't just riding roughshod over everything else being done. So when we approached this as a learning and development organisation, so at the time I was Director of Learning and Development for Technology at LSEG in the early 2020s, the plan was that we would really roll out a competency programme and also have that aligned to what was going on within the tech space itself. So as the organisation was developing a bigger understanding of what AI meant to it and how it would roll it out in a well-governed way, is how we could then apply the AI to the individuals. So they had an understanding of what was going on, both in the wider market and I guess in the kind of the more regular layman space, but also then how we could apply that to some of the specific technologies, particularly in the cloud space, and some of the areas of software development that were being targeted by our developers in terms of how they could make it work most effectively.
Wow. So that's kind of quite technical. So, but you do come from a technical background, which I think is quite interesting because you've got a lot more depth of understanding of what it is as a tool. Which leads me to my next questions. So what does it mean to L&D professional? who obviously very few of them have their level of understanding of deep programming or technology that you have. So what do they need to develop to be able to implement AI projects?
So again, I think we have a handy slide ready for this. So something I thought about, to those of you watching, Gail and I were discussing prior to the conversation today, is really to try and understand how L&D teams can think about what they can do with AI. And I thought the best way to do this would be to show this in a visual way. So you've got here some examples. These are not exhaustive, but there are a lot of things we can do with AI as an organization. And there's been some great work done by Don Taylor and Egla Veniscute, and apologies to Egla if I've mangled your name. But I'm always quoting these guys. They've done some incredible work in this space, looking at how L&D teams are using AI. And I think at the back of this set of slides that I've shared, there are some good links for you with a number of different people that are very prevalent in the industry on this. But there are 10 examples here. And these are things that can be done with just a Gen AI tool. So it could be something like ChatGPT, or it could be something like Claude or similar. Very, very easy to get, free versions available. And those will include things like on-the-job coaching. So you can give an AI tool a scenario and ask it to coach you and ask you to give you questions to help you then develop how you would approach that situation. Following on from that, you can set up role plays. You can give it a persona to be and to then have a conversation with the AI tool in order to develop, and it'll also give you feedback if you ask it. You can do a lot of work in learning design. So one of the things we're going to talk about in a moment, I think, is around how do we use knowledge that's available within an organization to actually drive how AI can help that organization. So you can input in playbooks and documents and even podcasts and videos from your organization, and you may want to target a particular piece of learning, whether it's in a sales space or it could be in a more technical area, all sorts of different areas, or operational areas. And you can get the AI to help you drive out what that learning design looks like. We can then have scenarios and simulations. I know there's a few companies, Totem being one that I've worked with directly, who've done some fantastic work on simulations where you are in a scenario where you will be doing something, and it's AI driven in how those responses work in real time with you. And there's several other companies that do similar, but that's a company that I've worked well with that I know does this really well. There's also then accessibility support. So how will an AI look at a particular scenario for an individual that may have access requirements for sight or for hard of hearing, or it could be there's a physical issue, and how can I actually plan that into some learning that's being delivered. We've got things like support and FAQs, so you can set up knowledge bases and again feed in documentation from your organisation to help drive that with most asked questions. You can set up chatbots, which I'm sure most people have come across. That can all be done with a learning slant. You can work with your partners for customized partner training. So really thinking about how can you use that specific knowledge you've got with a partner, and how can you drive that learning to be very customized to that situation. Again, the AI will take a lot of the time required out of building that. Measuring learning impact, I certainly have chucked a load of learning data into an AI tool and asked it to analyze that for me to look at how that's actually working. And in the technical space, I've actually written about this for Training Journal, how we can use real world technical objectives to drive out the impact of learning. But you can do that in lots of other ways with Kirkpatrick. You can basically feed it a model and it will use that model to look at how effective that learning is. I talked about FAQs and chatbots. You've got dynamic knowledge bases, so you can attach that to things like ServiceNow for anyone that's ever had to put in a request for a software issue, or they've asked for something. You can attach those to things like ServiceNow or to Jira and other similar tools that will help you find out information you need to. And then there's also the course curation and update. So where we have people want to create courses on a particular topic, again, you can take that information you have in your organization already, feed that in, and it will generate course outlines for you. And if you want it to, even scripts or even actual module detail that you can then apply to a learning platform. So those are just some examples. As I say, it's not exhaustive, but hopefully, Gail, with that, it's given a good overview of all the different potential uses that we have.
That is amazing. We really are dwelling into now the learning side of it. Previously, in the previous episode, we've been quite higher up on the talent management element of it, so quite strategic. But now we can really see it as it can all worked around learning. Now, my next questions really is to the technical person in you, is that how does it all fit? Because I'm sure most L&D professionals, how big, whether they're the one person in an organization, so they're part of a larger team, they normally have to manage a certain level of infrastructure. So they most of the time have an LMS. Most of them are no longer called LMS, but still a big library of
LXP.
content.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There is a more glamorous name to it, but that's what it is. And then you've got a variety of other work infrastructure that the L&D department is working with. How is the AI currently sitting in that infrastructure? Is it on top? Is it part of it? And then, what do you think it's going to go in the future?
It's a great question. So mainly it sits within. So if you look at there's quite a lot of companies now that are producing AI-led platforms. So that AI will be sitting within the platform. So it will be sitting behind the scenes, looking at patterns of behavior. So one of the big things that we know AI does really well is look at patterns of behavior and how those could be applied. So if you're somebody that tends to look at certain types of courses, it may offer you more of those certain types of courses. And that will sit in a layer below the front end, if you like, that the end user will see. A lot of it also depends on where you're getting your data from. So when we talk about data in this case, we're talking about where your course content is coming from. So for example, if you're working in an environment where you have very close coupled documentation, as I said, playbooks, anything that's specific to your organization, you may be setting that up within a small language model. So just from that very small core of information, and you're not going out to the wider internet and using that as the basis for what's being generated. Conversely, you may be taking data that's coming from the internet, or maybe you're taking courses that are pre-generated from one of the big learning platforms, and that may be what you're accessing, or you may be getting data that's coming from various places and rebadging that. Now, there's some issues there around IP, intellectual property, and how that's managed. But in either way, I think how we're seeing things more and more is, what is it that you need for you that's customizable? And I'm sure that's a theme that you probably discussed with previous guests and will come up again. One of the big, I guess, the big zeitgeist things around AI is that customization. What is it what's important to me? What's important that means that I get my learning the way that I like best? So in the format that I like, that gives me the best outcomes, that I'm actually ingesting it properly and taking it in, and that those outputs that I get from having learnt actually have a positive impact on the organization. And that's where we see AI really at the moment. I think that will carry on that customization and that micro customization for individuals, that at the moment it's very hard to do that at scale. So you might look at a cohort of individuals doing a particular job type or with particular skill sets, but we can really hone those down now to very, very fine levels.
That sounds very exciting. A lot is going to happen. I've got two questions actually, and might be quite small and quite niche, and I apologize if others if we should know about it. You mentioned small language model. What do you want to explain us a little bit? We all heard about large language models, but how does it compare?
Yeah, sure. So large language models generally will take information from across the internet. So they will could be from all sorts of places, good and bad, which is why we sometimes get hallucinations in our AI answers, which is always something to be mindful of. With small language models, you're looking at much more specific much more focused AI. So there'll be specific sets of tasks or specific knowledge bases that those are drawn from. One of the positives about an SLM is that you've got more control over the quality of your data because it's coming from a much smaller pool of information. Now, there's good and bad reasons why we like LLMs and SLMs, depending what we're using them for. But you'll get a faster response from an SLM. You'll get, as I say, more accurate data because you'll have more control over the source material that you're using. Now, it's generally used more when you have specialists. So it might be used for training a very specific skill set in whatever that is, whether it's science-based or sales-based or operational-based or technical-based. And it's really good where you want to have some privacy and maybe some more guardrails over your governance. So you know where that data's come from, you know what the intellectual property status is of that. You also will be able to control who has access to that more easily. Not that you can't close off the content that you get from LLMs, but you'll know that that source material has come from potentially, you know, if you've got sensitive stuff in there, that's come from a place that you've got control over that. There are some specific tools that you can use to generate those SLMs. I've got them listed, but you've got Phi, which is the Microsoft one, Mistral, and Google has Gemma, which is a different version of Gemini. There's also an argument over Notebook LM, which is another Google tool, which you can really generate specific sources. In fact, that's how it works. You can also get stuff from the general internet from them, but you can also be very specific on what you do, and you can keep that in a lockdown space. So there's a few examples there of actual tools that are being used to do that. It is very, very useful where companies want something that's very granular, and they're not really wanting to get the whole world view, if you like, because sometimes you do get wrong answers. And where you're doing something that's very specific, you want to make sure that you've got the right data there for people.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for clarifying the difference between SLM and LLM. Clearly, there seems to be some benefits, and that drives me back to us as L&D professionals. It seems to be vastly complex, vastly technical, and becoming even more. How are we going to keep up? Where do we need to develop? What are the key skills and competencies we need to navigate this world?
The first thing I'd say is don't use AI like you use Google. It's a waste of resources to do that. Google does a perfectly good job of being Google. Where AI works really well and where you can build a very good working relationship with AI as a very good assistant, and that really is what we're thinking of it as, is a really good assistant that takes a lot of the pain away from some of the heavy legwork things. So you can still do the thinking bits yourself, but it's getting the AI to generate a lot of the stuff that's a bit sort of just the heavy bits and pieces, is thinking about how we converse with the AI. So it's using it with really clear sets of approach to how we do our prompting. So there's some guys called Dakin and Feller who are in the US and Ireland that in the last couple of years have developed what we call the 4Ds. Now, they developed this as a how can we get our prompting really smart, and it got picked up by Anthropic, who are one of the big AI companies. They own Claude, which is a really nice tool to use actually. And they have some fantastic training courses. And again, I've put a link to that on the slides that I've shared with you, Gail, for everybody. And we talk about delegation, description, discernment, and diligence. So when you're writing a prompt, we cover these things. So delegation. So what are we going to do ourselves? And we still have brains. It's still good to use the brain. But versus what can we get the AI to help with? So that might be that we've got an idea for something and we say, do you know what? I've got an idea for this. Can you draw me out a framework with these areas that I want to focus on? And the AI will help you with that. And you can have a back and forth with them. You'd also think about the description. So being really clear. So if you were telling a real life assistant, please, could you help me with this? This is what I'd like to do. Think about approaching the AI in exactly the same way. So be contextually accurate. So why do we need it? What's the context of us using it? Be clear, be concise where you can be. Always difficult in my case. Thinking about if you're using particular frameworks. So Bloom's taxonomy, for example, in our world of L&D, or you want to use Kirkpatrick to measure against. Be really clear on that stuff. And you think about the tone you're taking, the depth of information you need, all of those things. So that's the second one. Discernment is thinking about what you get back. So when you're using an AI, you should be going into it thinking about what am I kind of expecting back from it. You may not have all the answers, but you should be able to have a little bit of a litmus test of getting an answer back. And if it feels wrong, tell it. Tell it it's wrong and say, actually, that doesn't feel right to me. I'm sure that it might be X, Y, and Z instead. And often it'll come back and say, oh, yeah, you know what? Even with a small language model, that can happen, but less so. So I think really having a really good idea yourself of what am I expecting back. And then the last thing is the diligence, and that's about using AI in an ethical manner and thinking about the governance and making sure that you're really transparent with what you're using the AI for, and that's really clear to your end users as well. So they know where this has come from. It's really important that with AI that we don't try and take credit for the AI's work, but equally we're really clear about actually what we have been thinking about and what we've been producing ourselves. That human element is really important still. That hasn't gone away. It's how we're using the AI to complement our own skills. So if you use those four things, so delegation, description, discernment, and diligence, and think about how you craft your prompts, you will find that what you get back is much more useful. And I found that after I took the Anthropic course, I very much went from using it a bit like Google at times to actually starting to really get a massive benefit from how I use the AI, because I was giving it quite long prompts and sometimes paragraphs and really good information. And then what I was getting back was quite thrilling, because I was thinking to myself, actually, this is great. This has saved me hours of actually manually having to do these things. A lot of it I would have thought of myself, but it's just having that framework and that ability to just actually fill in the gaps for you that's really useful.
Interestingly, you're going to very disappoint my eldest son, who is was hoping that AI will allow him to get rid of English as a subject in school, and clearly not. I can see that listening to you, we really need to be very specific with our communication, and really have some very good communication skills when interacting with AI. To get the result that we need. And I'm probably the first things I'm going to do after finishing this recording is sign up for the Anthropic course. So thank you very much for sharing. I also would like to say that for people watching, that you will see Catherine has shared with us a document where there is a descriptions of the 4D that you will be able to access just below the recording on the thinkskills.net page for Learning Horizons. And that is brilliant. So really what I'm hearing is that prompting is quite an essential skills to develop for L&D professionals, or probably for all professionals really. You mentioned the Anthropic course. How do you suggest people go about developing these skills?
To practice. And I say that advisedly because one thing that I've actually found is I use AI quite sparingly, bizarrely. So I don't use it all day, every day. And in fact, I actually switch AI off. Sometimes if I'm just doing a regular Google search, I put minus AI at the end because actually I'm not looking to use it all the time. There is a big question over resource use still. There are differing takes on the amount of water and other resources that are used, energy resources used when we are searching. As someone that's very environmentally minded, I'm very mindful of that. So I would just say to people, don't use it like all day, every day for everything. It's where you need it for something specific. And there's some terrible AI slop that's created on the imaging side as well, which again, people seem to be using it for fun. And I always think, use it for something where you really need it, because that's all, there's resources being used up in doing that. But that aside, I guess it's really about honing that skill of asking it the questions well. And that's just about practice and seeing what you get back from the AI when you're asking those questions. Think about, and I'd always say this to anyone, what is the objective of the reason you're using the AI? So what are you trying to get out of it? How does it link back? We're talking in a business capacity here for L&D teams, for example, and similar. What is it that your organization wants out of the learning? So when you're asking the AI questions, think about what's the outcome that you want that will be able to test. Has this met what I've wanted it to do? And I think if you have that in the back of your mind when you're asking those questions, you will get better answers back that will help you actually fulfill those outcomes that you're looking for. I should also say, Gail, alongside Anthropic, I know there are a few people that are doing excellent AI courses. So I know that Valerie Merrill, for example, she's great. She does a great course, and I know that Carolyn Shepherd as well, on the particularly on the Copilot side, do very very good courses. So I'd say there's some really good humans out there that we know in the UK L&D community, particularly, that are worth reaching out to. But the Anthropic is a great one in terms of for anyone generally, wherever you are in the world, who wants to kind of learn how to do that smart prompting. It's a free resource that everyone's got access to, which is why I like to champion that one, because it's just there. But I think there's a lot to be gained from having those ILT courses with those human beings that we know who are very hot on how they can use those for specific examples. So I just wanted to pop that in.
That's lovely. Yeah, I did personally took the Google one, the free Google one on prompting. But yes, Caroline, that was on the previous episode, mentioned the courses, and thank you for mentioning Valerie Merrill. I really like Valerie, and that is a great recommendation. Actually, talking of prompting, I remember one of the speakers, Trish Hull at Learning Technology, said, well, if you're starting, try to get a picture, because if you're looking for a picture, like, you know, if you've got a picture in your head and try to get the AI to recreate it in real life or in a tangible way, you will know instinctively if it's right or wrong. So if in your mind you wanted a sketch and then they come with a, I don't know, a picture, like a photo kind of things, then, you know, you will realize that you didn't put the right prompt. And I thought it was quite insightful. And I actually did it during my prompting course. But what I did, I used 3 different AI tools. So I compared with the same prompt, Gemini, le chat from Mr. AI, and the ChatGPT visual creations tool. It was fascinating to see the difference of outcome with exactly the same prompt. But that's probably for another conversation. I just wanted also to, so going back into, you know, this world that we're describing, where really we can practice safely in simulations, in all sorts of forms for the employees. Well, with AI, we all know the data are going to sit somewhere. So as an employee, my question would be, it's great, you know, you want to maybe monitor my calls or monitor my my emails to make sure that I'm applying what I'm learning. How is it going to be used to help me develop, or on the other hand, against me in some form of performance, dismissive performance approach?
So this is a very tricky area, and I think it's an area where there's a lot of ongoing movement. I'm going to try not to sit on the fence too much, but it's a bit of a depends on your employer, I think, at the moment. So obviously, from a, you know, if we look at it on the positive side, where people are being developed and we have that opportunity to have coaching and feedback, and that side of it, that's great. And hopefully that's something that it can be used in terms of performance reviews in a positive way. So, oh, this is great. I see you did this feedback training. This is fantastic. Really, I would say there's a couple of things that I would advise to L&D teams is make sure that there is an AI policy being developed with your HR departments. That needs to be very clear, and I think that needs to be something that sits probably at a pretty senior level, and also how that then impacts in terms of your general IT policies as well. So there is obviously a connection there between how AI is used from an IT perspective and then within HR. There are obviously, and I can only really speak for the UK, there are employment laws in place that do protect employees to an extent around how their data is used. But I, at the moment, couldn't give you a kind of, you know, finger in the air, definite, these are the things in place to cover you. The EU AI Act, for those elsewhere in Europe, I know does cover some protection as well for employees and more generally with data. It's not an area of expertise for me, but I do know, and from general experience, having had these conversations in the last couple of years, it really is important that people have an understanding of AI policy in their organisation. But HR needs to be very, very clear and transparent, and I don't think that is yet legally mandatory in the UK, for example, for that to happen. So sorry if I'm fudging it slightly, but my suggestion to everyone is go and talk to your heads of HR, go and talk to your heads of IT, just see what's being put in place. Some organizations are better than others. I know there are some places that are really good on having AI policy and how that data will be used. Other places, not so much. So I think it's a bit of a moving park at the moment.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're perfectly aligned with Karen Shepherd, who was there on the previous episode, and kind of say the same thing. I mean, the having an AI policy is definitely the one thing that organizations need to definitely start thinking about. And definitely something that we will probably address in a future episode. So thank you very much, Catherine, for bringing it up. We are already running out of time, and there were so many questions I wanted to ask you. So I will ask my last question, which is, if there was one advice you would give to a team of L&D professionals about getting started on AI, what would it be?
Great question. I would say look at what your biggest pain points are at the moment and think about how could AI help me reduce those pain points. So it might be that you're getting lots of people asking you for lots of different types of courses at once. And you might say, well, actually, I've got loads of stuff here that we could use. I wonder if AI could start to generate some learning packs for me or some course content or something that then covers this big demand that we've got. Or it might be you have a lot of changes going on. So you might be in a, for example, a very technical environment where you have software that is regularly being updated by providers and that your teams need to get regular updates on that. Or it could be, again, in operational sense, you've got manufacturing where things are changing regularly, or there are processes being brought in at regular intervals, and they need to be updated quickly. So think about, could the AI help you with those things? Think about those pain points, and if you focus on those, again, as I said earlier, necessity is the mother of invention. It's a really great opportunity to start with something that's impacting you directly now, because the AI then, you can immediately see a positive outcome in that. I think to sort of do the broad brush and, well, I think you should just use AI for everything. I actually think that's not necessarily the best way of addressing it. So think about what's important to you now. Can the AI help with it? And then have a think about using those 4Ds. How can I use really smart prompting to support getting those outcomes I want to fix my pain points?
That is great. Thank you so much. I love the way you approach it in such a practical, in such a practical way, which is very tangible, very accessible, I would say. So it was a real pleasure to have you today on Learning Horizon, Catherine. Thank you for your time. And for everybody who's watching, Catherine has prepared some amazing resources that are going to be shared on the Learning Horizons page, just below the recording. So you will find the course recommendations, you will find the models, you'll find also how to follow Catherine on LinkedIn and to read some of her articles. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, everybody who is watching. We're looking forward to seeing you on another episode very soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.